What are the new Shadows of Change unit stats, abilities, and roles in their army? Let's go! First up, looking like a villain straight out of Power Rangers, the Jade Dragon himself, Yuan Bo. His stats on foot are pretty good, better than Zhao and Miao, as he does have armor piercing, which they both don't. And in his dragon form, his stats are literally identical to Zhao Ming's, so expect a similar performance when he's dragoned up. For his abilities, he has the Dragon's Fang, which is just a massive damage boost for him, and the Emperor's Executioner, which will allow him to insta-kill any lord or hero that is below 20% health. It's pretty crazy, right? But it is limited in uses, so it's not too bad. He does have his own mixed magic lore as well of Jade Shield, Blossom Wind, Talons of Night, Shem's Burning Gaze, Net of Amantok, and Comet of Cassandora. He can also get Armor of the Dragon's Gaze that will give him a 10% damage resistance, as well as giving nearby allies a little bit of leadership and an immunity to psychology. So, some very cool stuff for Yuan Bo, but ultimately he's not really that different from either of the other two Dragon Lords. And then we have the new generic lord, the Celestial General. Some nice melee stats, gearing him towards being a damage dealer with that higher melee attack, nice weapon strength with armor piercing as well. He has a good defensive ability, which will give him and nearby friendly troops 40 melee defense and a 20% physical resistance for a short time. And he also has a Celestial Sweep ability, which is basically a big hammer blow that does lots of damage. So the Celestial General bringing a nice melee-focused option for Cathay. Of course, there is the Lord Magistrate as well, but he's more about supporting the troops and isn't so good in melee himself, whereas this general is good in melee and a good damage dealer. He can also have a horse or Longma mount. And then we have the one and only infantry, Cathay got this DLC, the Grace of Kuei Yin, Celestial Dragon Crossbows, Regiment of Renown. Basically the same as the normal version, a few improved stats, slightly better in the melee. They also have magical attacks on their ranged damage, which is very handy. And more notably for their purpose, they have 20 extra range and 10 extra missile strength over their normal counterpart. So just a very strong missile unit that can be made even more dangerous with their active ability, Mark of Yin, which will reduce missile resistance by 20%, missile block chance by 24%, and armor by 30% of all units within a 180 meter radius, which by the way is huge and is literally just their range. And it lasts 28 seconds, so think about that teamed up with all the other missile units in the army, it's going to get pretty nasty. They'll be able to pour out damage as well as allowing all their other friendly missile units to pour out damage. Very nice. And then we have a single entity monster in the Jade Lion, a Guardian Lion. It's got good damage dealer stats, armor piercing, also has flammable on its melee attacks, which gives a 20% weakness to fire, but honestly that's not that useful because there isn't that much fire damage in the Cathay army. There's that one Regiment of Renown missile unit, but they've got flammable anyway, so this isn't going to help them. The only other thing you could really use it with is a cannon or maybe some fire magic spells. They also have the Jade Conduit ability, which will constantly recharge your magic for an infinite duration. And it has its own little breath spell to use a couple of times as well. So it can help your magic, it can do a little bit of damage, not a bad little single entity. And then there's the Jet Lion, very much a similar deal, although a little bit more defensive rather than being a damage dealer, has that higher melee defense than melee attack, and comes with its own bound Missile Mirror spell, so that one where you can reflect missiles back at an enemy, you can use that I think twice. Then it also has the Guardian Shield, which is a 20% spell resistance for itself and nearby friendly units. Oh, and that little symbol on its melee attack, Disrupted, will reduce physical resistance by 10% and increase miscast chance by 100% of whatever it touches. So I'd say if you want a unit that can be a bit more aggressive and push on the enemy, you'd want to take a Jade Lion. But if you want to play a bit more defensive and have something that protects a little better, then you'd want the Jet Lion to hang around with your army. If you really want the supportiest of support units though, the Zangu War Drum will have you covered. Not the best in melee with only 20 melee defense and fairly low weapon strength, so generally try to keep it out of combat so it stays alive for longer because it can provide some very powerful buffs. First of all, +8 leadership for everything within a 50 meter range, so you could maybe get 2 or 3 frontline units with that. And then you've also got 2 other abilities. One gives +24 armor to all friendlies within 100 meters, and the other +8 melee attack to all friendlies within 100 meters. However, you can only have one of those 2 active at a time, so you're either buffing the armor to help keep your troops alive, or you're buffing the melee attack to help them do more damage, whatever suits the situation. So some really nice support abilities, 100 meters on those 2 abilities as well, so that's pretty much your front line covered. And it also helps the harmony system because it'll buff both yin and yang units rather than just one like most things in this army do. Very nice. And then there's the Regiment of Renown version, the Jade War Drum. Basically exactly the same thing, a few slight stat improvements, but still keep it out of combat. The big difference here is that as well as having that plus armor ability or plus melee attack ability, it now has a third option you can choose where you can imbue magical attacks to all units within 100 meters and plus 15% speed. So you have three options with this war drum, either armor, melee attack, or magical attacks. And that magical attacks is going to be very powerful against certain factions. Like anything with a lot of demons, you can take away their physical resistance by imbuing magical attacks. So this is going to be a pretty essential piece to bring against a lot of factions with a lot of physical resistances. So a very nice unit for making Cathay's front lines way more flexible. And then we have a new flying unit for Cathay, the Onyx Crowmen, a melee flying infantry. A very nice speedy harassing unit, great for getting after missiles and artillery, chasing after skirmish cav. They have Vanguard deployment, so a very nice unit for Cathay. Doesn't really add anything they didn't have before, because you did have peasant cavalry that could kind of do the same thing. Not quite as well, not being flying, but still, they had that harassing option. They are very good though, they do seem to be very strong from my use of them in campaign, especially when you buff them up a bit. They also have the Eyes of the Empress ability, which gives them plus 80 visibility range, so they'll be very good at spotting those stalk units very early. And then there's the Regiment of Renown version, the Empress Crowmen. Basically the same thing, a few improved stats. And then they have the Nangao Grenades ability, which allows them to drop grenades, much like Pterodons or something, except there are 60 of them in the unit, so that's a lot of grenades. So a very nice flying unit for Cathay will help them get that air superiority. On to Kislev then, first up with Mother Ostankya. She is a ranged chariot lord. Her melee stats aren't too great, she should be used like a chariot, keep her moving, don't leave her in melee combat, she's only got 40 armor and 32 melee defense, she'll take damage quick. Although she does have a bit of a ward save. Her real power though is in her massive ranged attack, which is armor piercing. It drops like a kind of mortar style blue smoky cloud of death, and it does a lot of damage, let me tell you. 120 range, so not too bad. Use her as a skirmish chariot most of the time, drop her magic here and there. She could be used to harass missile units and backlines maybe. For her spells, she's got from the Lore of Beasts, the Curse of Anraher, the Amber Spear and Flock of Doom, and then from the Lore of Shadows, Occam's Mind Razor, Enfeebling Foe, and the Withering. For abilities, she has one called Goyaz, which is an area heal. It'll heal anything it touches in a small area. Spirit Bear, which, well, I just feel I need to show you. She can also get the Crown of Claws, which will give a 20% missile resistance to her and nearby friendlies. So a very good skirmishing chariot damage lord with some support ability. She also has this cool animation, which I warn you, look away, Skaven lovers. Next to our hero, who is also chariot bound, pulled by these lovely black stags. Now I warn you, when you see her face, your first thought might be, Grandad! But don't panic, it's just the Hag Witch. She is virtually the same as Mother Ostankya. Everything I just said about her applied to the Hag Witch. She's just not as strong stats-wise, but otherwise still a ranged chariot. However, she does come with two key differences. Number one, she comes with a summon spell. You can summon some things in the wood, the monstrous infantry we'll look at in a second. She also offers 3 new magic laws that Kislev did not have access to. The Lore of Beasts, the Lore of Shadows, and the Lore of Death. Although I guess they kind of already did have Shadows from Ulrika, but whatever. The Hag Witch, a nice hero addition for Kislev. Next to the missile infantry with Akshina ambushers. They are primarily a stealthy ranged unit, not too great in the melee to be honest, only 30 armor, 28 melee attack. Do have armor piercing though, but that should really be a last resort for them. Try to use up their ammunition first because it is very strong, 23 armor piercing damage, good bit of range. Of course, they've got Stalk and Vanguard deployment, so you can pull off those sneaky tactics if you wish. Overall, a nice little fun unit, but nothing that's really doing anything new for Kislev. They've already got a lot of strong missile units, although with these at least you've got an armor-piercing missile that can fire over stuff, because the Streltsy can't do that. And then there's the Regiment of Renown version, the Wolfhearts, who are basically the same, a few stat improvements, a little better in melee, but still I'd keep melee as a last resort. Their unique thing though is an ability called Pack Trap, which will pin a unit in place for a whole 25 seconds. That's enough time to kill just about anything with a few units of armor-piercing missiles. It's pretty horrible, and probably will be nerfed. And then there's the Regiment of Renowned Streltsy, Boydanov's Brawlers. They're not too shabby in the melee, better than regular Streltsy anyway, but they have 13 more missile damage, giving them 30 armor-piercing missile strength. However, they've lost 40 range, so they're kind of a short-range version of Streltsy. They got kind of blunderbusses instead of long-range rifles. Would be nicely teamed up with the previous unit and their pack trap ability. Now to the monsters, starting with the things in the wood. These are beastly, monstrous infantry that are also anti-infantry, so that's their main target. They're not super tough with only 30 armor and 32 melee defense, so they might need some healing and support, although they do have a 20% physical resistance. But they do offer Kislev a new unit type to their roster, which is very nice, a good support for the front line perhaps. A massy heavy unit that can stop enemy units just pulling through your front line, chariots and cavalry and whatnot. Plus that good damage dealing power against infantry. They do have a nice charge bonus as well, so probably want to cycle charge them a little bit. Very nice. If you want to know the cost of any of these new units, by the way, I'll put them at the end of the video. And then there's the Regiment of Renown version, the Mordheim Beowulfs. These are literally the same thing, just with slightly better stats, and you see that funny little colored ability on their melee attack. That is Dark Blood Tainted. This is a pretty unique new ability, I think, because it stops enemies from healing and reduces their speed by 10%. But that could be pretty big. If you attack a regenerating unit, you will stop them regenerating, basically. It removes 100% of healing received, so there might be a way to actually kill Vlad von Carstein for once. And then we have the big boy, the Incarnate Elemental of Beasts. This is a big single entity monster. You can't really tell here, but he's about as tall as a giant. Got some strong damage dealing, combat stats, magical attacks, armor piercing, and a bonus versus large, so he's an anti-large boy. Doesn't have the best defenses though, with only 50 armor and 30 melee defense, although he does have a physical resistance. And check out that chunky charge bonus of 64. Probably want to try and charge him around a fair bit to make use of that. Don't just leave him in combat, especially as he has Fear and Terror, so you can try and route some units off nice and easy. He also has Incarnate Flock of Doom, which is basically his own Flock of Doom spell that goes on around him all the time, but only when he's above 25% health. So a great way for him to do some extra damage, although maybe more against infantry or cavalry, because against single monsters, it's probably not going to do that much. But a very nice anti-large beastie for Kislev. Now to Tzeentch, starting with the Changeling, of course. Combat stats-wise in this form, he is not great. He could maybe take on some lesser infantry until his barrier breaks, but after that, you'd really want to be careful. He does come with the lore of Tzeentch, though, so I primarily just keep him out the way and use him as a caster at first until you want to transform, which isn't too hard because he has an ability called Cowled and Cloaked, which will give him a 10% damage resistance and give him Stalk while you have 15 winds of magic or more. And he has an ability that can create a mirror image of himself. You know how a Lithanar can make a little clone of himself? Well, he can do that, and when he does, he gets Unspottable, Stalk, and Snipe, so he can stay well out the way. But obviously, the Changeling's big party trick is that he can transform into any other Lord or Legendary hero in the game, getting their stats, spells, abilities, everything. So it's pretty wild, and there's going to be some pretty crazy combos with the Tzeentch army. For example, in my campaign, I got Festus, and I changed into Festus, and thus gave my Tzeentch army infinite healing, which is pretty crazy. In custom battles, you can just choose whichever lord or hero you'd like to change him into, but in campaign, you do have to earn them over time. But still, it's a very nice, unique ability, something really different. Now for the first new Tzeentch and other Chaos factions hero, the Blue Scribes. These little fellas are pretty special. Although in melee, they're nothing to write home about. Get it, Scribes? Never mind. They're pretty squishy, although they do have nice weapon strength, armor piercing. They do have a missile attack that's pretty strong as well. But what's really fun about these little lads is that they will get 6 random spells every time you start a battle. And then when you use one of those spells, you will get another 6 random spells from any lore book. So let's say at the start of a battle, your first 3 spells is Burning Head, Earthblood, and Pit of Shades. You then use Pit of Shades, it'll then change all your spells, and you'll now have, say, Foot of Gork, Net of Amantok, and Vermintide, so you can summon some clan rats as Tzeentch or any other Chaos faction that can unlock the Blue Scribes. That's pretty cool. It is, of course, a random luck which spells you get, but that's a pretty fun, unique mechanic. I like it. They also have another ability that will increase their spell mastery up to 20% the more spells that are cast around them, whether friendly or enemy. And then the other new legendary hero, called Hellbrass, a pure melee boy. Lots of armor, bronze shield, lots of melee attack, big weapon strength, anti-infantry armor piercing, magic attacks on there as well, pretty big charge bonus. One of his activatable abilities will give -8 leadership and -45 speed to all those enemies around him for 23 seconds. And he also has a magic missile which will turn into a vortex upon landing, so that's probably a good anti-infantry spell. And oh, he has his own regeneration healing, so he's gonna be pretty tough to kill. Overall, just a big powerhouse of melee, a scary lad. And then to an infantry with Zangors. These are Tzeentch beastmen. They're pretty much what you'd expect, just a beastmen unit with some Tzeentch twists. They've got magical attacks. They do have a big silver shield, so good against those missiles. Their base stats aren't super strong or anything, but they have an ability called Arcane Charge, which will increase their damage output with the more spells being used around them, whether friendly or foe. So they can gain an extra 20% damage from that. They also have Vanguard deployment, so they can get in the enemy's face quickly, as beastmen like to do. So a nice unit to have, but not one that Tzeentch ever really needed. They've got plenty of infantry, they've got marauders if you want something cheaper, they've got chaos warriors if you want something stronger. This kind of just sits in the middle. I guess the Vanguard deployment is maybe the big sell. And then for a regiment of renown of the pink horrors, the Sour Guts. Honestly, they are basically the same, a few improved stats. Their only difference is that they will explode upon death, thus doing a little extra damage as they die. Use them exactly the same as the regular pink horrors, I guess. When they run out of ammo, maybe you could kamikaze them into a strong enemy unit to let them kill them and then they'll explode and do the damage. I guess that sounds like a very Tzeentch way to go. And then Regiment of Renowned Screamers, the Shrieking Skyrays. Again, they're basically the same as their normal unit. A few stat improvements, still armor piercing, anti-large. Use them the same as before, except now they come with an ability, Lamprey's Bite. It says it's an explosion spell, but it's kind of more of a wind spell. It's like a laser that goes across the ground forward. Does some damage, but also knocks everything all over the place, so it's kind of like a formation disruptor more than anything, it seems. So nothing too special with this one. Then we have another big bird for the roster, the Cockatrice. Cockatrix. However you want to pronounce it, it's a birdie boy that gets into melee. Pretty good melee stats, poison on there, magical attacks, armor piercing. It's also pretty fast, so a good one for disrupting missiles and stuff. It's got terror, so that can be a good thing to try and make use of. Terrorize units, scare them off. It also has an ability called Petrifying Gaze, which reduces all nearby units' melee attack by 10 and speed by 10%. So a little debuffing support, but otherwise nothing really new to the Tzeentch roster. They already had the Lords of Change that were flying single entities. They already had a bunch of other flyers, so this isn't really going to fill any holes, but it could maybe be a little bit more versatile in what it attacks, whether infantry or single entities, whatever. And for the last couple of units, something a little bit different for the Tzeentch roster, just a big, tanky, single entity monster boy. The Mutalith Vortex Beast. Overall, just a big damage powerhouse, lots of melee attack, weapon strength, bonus versus large on this big boy, armor piercing, charge bonus, it's got it all, you can see it. A little bit lacking in the melee defense, but it's hard to move when you're that goddamn big, I guess. And aside from smashing things in the face and doing lots of damage, it also has the Gift of Mutation, which gives +8 melee attack to all nearby friendly units. It also has the Aura of Mutation, which will cause damage to nearby enemy combatants, so it's like a Mortis engine. And it's not done yet because it also has the Tides of Transformation, which, you see that big magical looking thing on its back? That will explode with magical energy in all directions, which also causes the Disorientated ability, which is -30% speed, -4 melee defense, and -6 melee attack to anything it touches. So aside from being a big damage dealer, it's also a good support unit. Basically just throw it in alongside your front line and it'll go to town. Lovely. But if that one looks a bit too wimpy for you, how about the Regiment of Renown version, Aeson the Fallen? Basically the same thing, a few improved stats of course, still has the Gift of Mutation but doesn't have the Aura of Mutation, that's the one that does the Mortis engine thing. However, it does have the Maelstrom of Change ability instead, which is a chain hex, direct damage, pretty hefty direct damage. So you do that on one unit, it'll spread to 4 other units, profit. So again, just big damage dealer powerhouse. Nasty. So that's all the units in the Shadows of Change DLC. Here's all the costs. If you want to see them, pause the video to have a closer look. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all the patrons who support this channel. I will see you in the future.